All right, there we are. Okay, hello everybody. It's Stuart. I'm back with our Kadena Fireside chats. This is our second one. The last one went so well that we decided that we want to do them all the time. And we're super excited to have Mason Borda with us, longtime friend of Kadena and very impressive person in crypto and Twitter. Thanks, Mason.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Excited to be here.
So yeah, let's get right to it. Mason, I wanted to give you a chance to talk. Well, just talk about yourself a little, but also talk about how you got introduced to Kadena and what attracted you to our project early on.
Yeah, so I started in the crypto space in 2013. The first thing that happened when I saw Bitcoin was I was like, this isn't going to work. And so first project was a dollar-based blockchain based on a fork of Bitcoin. And then ended up at a company called BitGo, was there for a couple of years. And then in 2017, started Tokensoft. There were a lot of token sales happening, and we wanted to see if we could scale that process. And so we started Tokensoft. Since then, we've helped projects, a lot of layer ones and DeFi projects that today represent about 10 billion in market cap. And if you think of the sale as like step one, the step two is actually making the token. And so we rolled out some tokenization software as well. And on top of that, we built wrap.com. And so we're using that to bring wrapped assets to blockchains like Kadena. And I think that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And how did I get in touch with Kadena? Well, one of our very early and very supportive investors is Meltem Demirors. And so Meltem at some point introduced me to Monica. And it was Monica that invited me to a event that Kadena had in New York, where you guys were presenting some of your early tooling and simulations. And so that's where I really got sort of the immersive experience with Kadena. And yeah, we've been in touch ever since.
Fantastic. And for folks who are new to Kadena, I just wanted to introduce our project too. My name is Stuart Popejoy. I'm one of the co-founders of Kadena, along with Will Martino. We founded Kadena in 2016 after leading the JP Morgan blockchain group beforehand. And really, our vision in founding Kadena was to bring some technology to market that could handle the kinds of, not just the scale, but also the kind of safety requirements of some of the things that we saw JP Morgan trying to do, and really wasn't possible on blockchains of that era, and to a large extent, not even now. And those issues being safety, mainly that you need to be able to write smart contracts that do what they say they're going to do and don't have a bunch of bugs lying in wait to so that all of a sudden you're wrecked for like $10 million, $20 million. And then two, the scale, the ability to actually take these things to industrial scale, to web scale, and be able to, not write apps that as soon as they have any popularity become a victim of their own success and, immediately slow down and start having huge gas fees and things like that. So towards that end, we developed a smart contract language called Pact, which is the safest smart contract language in blockchain. It's the easiest one to write some smart contracts in, and it uniquely has the ability for normal developers to use a very sophisticated technique called formal verification to achieve a level of security around smart contracts that is impossible with other technologies. We combined this with our scalable proof of work platform, which is based on the Chainweb protocol, the Kadena blockchain. And this takes a single chain like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum and puts it with a bunch of others and braids them together such that the security is greater than with one chain, but it also scales the amount of throughput you can have with each chain. When we launched, we had 10 chains almost a year later, not quite a year later, we scaled to 20 chains, and the blockchain can scale really up to any size, with the only practical limitation being bandwidth and CPU and things like that. So it's today, with 20 chains, we have enough throughput to settle the entire US stock market. And certainly we have what it takes to be able to settle every transaction in crypto. And because of Pact and the way Pact makes it easy to transact across chains, easy and safe, we can foresee a world where Kadena's DeFi infrastructure can provide a unified market to all blockchains, where there's kind of a safe clearinghouse for cross-chain trades, which is an idea that you and I actually talked about, Mason, when we were first firing up the Wrapped project.
Yeah, I think you guys definitely have a lot of features that make it, I guess, provide a little bit more confidence with transacting in the DeFi space. I think we've definitely seen a lot of hacks just being in the space for a long time. So I think that's definitely a couple of things that drew us to working with you guys.
So yeah, so in this year, we're moving ahead with, we have this thing we're calling DeFi infrastructure, which is basically making these kind of highly scalable and very safe models available in a way that our vision is that right now on Ethereum, the way you innovate is you copy paste and make changes to the original code to kind of make your feature happen. What we would like to see is something where kind of some of the base models are represented as shared infrastructure, and then innovators basically provide value add on top. So for instance, you see models like this over something like Uniswap. And I think Uniswap actually has provided a level of DeFi infrastructure. So we want to do that with everything from bonding to lending platform to NFTs to, and then of course to DEXs and DeFi. And that again takes us back to Wrapped, because one thing that's very important to us, and one thing we are looking to Wrapped for, is that, with our institutional background coming from JP Morgan, we're very interested in bridges that really can deliver on providing high quality institutional liquidity and done in a safe way. And, that takes us back to Wrapped, of course.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, Wrap.com is a solution that brings, it basically, for many of these assets, we've partnered with Anchorage as a qualified custodian that holds the assets. And basically, investors send in their assets, they get held in custody, and Wrap.com creates a one-for-one equivalent, in this case, of Bitcoin on the Kadena blockchain. And so this is something that sort of provides, institutions and folks that have those sort of compliance reporting obligations a little bit of confidence in that their assets are now held with a qualified custodian. That's actually a federally chartered bank now. And the assets are one-to-one backed. And so they're all held in custody. And now there's sort of an institutional grade bridge where you can go back and forth from the Kadena world back to the Bitcoin world or the ETH world as well. So we'll be launching both KBTC on Kadena and also KETH, or Keith as I call it, on Kadena. And so this will allow institutions to bring in their Bitcoin, Ethereum that are perhaps just sitting there dormant, and now bring them into the DeFi world on Kadena and interact with all the apps that are going to be rolling out in the Kadena ecosystem.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's super exciting, and it's a great way for the Kadena blockchain and users of the Kadena blockchain to get exposure to those assets. And likewise, as you were saying, it's a great way for trapped liquidity in BTC and ETH to access these new markets. One of the things we're really focused on in terms of our approach to DEX liquidity is really about having a really diverse collection of assets, in the sense that obviously stablecoins are important, but there's also some of our other partners that we're working with, like Terra and Celo, you know, they represent kind of unique visions of how to do a stablecoin, how to do stablecoins other than USD, you know, and so a lot of what you're going to see on Kadena is this mix of stuff that's coming from different platforms and things that have, you know, and for those platforms too, the idea being that they're going to get the ability to have access to a kind of unique composition of liquidity of different tokens. But you know, it's got to have BTC and it's got to have ETH. Those are you know, obviously really important central cryptos, and we're super excited about firing this off with Wrapped.
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, diversity of assets is definitely key towards a healthy ecosystem. I think we're seeing that everywhere. It's not just a single asset that sort of maybe helps bootstrap the platform, but at the end of the day, it's going to be having a diversity of assets and having people that are interested in different communities, being able to get exposure to the assets they want and to be able to interact with them, and in this case, in a more safe and scalable manner.
Yeah, and one thing we're as we work on our decentralized bridges, I think that what we're starting to see is that there's going to be a really nice synergy between really, you know, kind of like rock solid institutional bridges like you're bringing, and then this notion of decentralized bridges, which, you know, let's be honest, it has been a little challenging. It's been difficult to bring decentralized bridges to market, and we're no exception. You know, earlier this year, we took a look at the space, and, you know, just strictly from a first principles viewpoint, we were like, oh, there's no reason why we can't have this bridge rolled out, you know, in a month or something like that. And some of the things that we've seen, for instance, something as simple as just being able to move coins over from something like Ethereum in a decentralized fashion, I mean, the first thing you're going to hit is huge gas fees. So I think what's really interesting about the Wrapped proposition is that it represents kind of, I mean, it's CeFi, right? Like like Anchorage is obviously centralized, but it's coming from such a principled place in terms of, you know, really providing an institutional level of quality and you know, confidence in the bridge. So that's an important piece. And then what we're doing with Kadena is, well, one thing is we've launched our bonding program, which already has 8 million, is already locking up 8.3 million of community KDA to secure the bridge. And this is just our initial run. We're going to be expanding that in the very near future, but, you know, first we want to start using it. And then what we're realizing is that with the power of a scalable smart contract platform like Pact, we have the ability to work with a high volume kind of liquidity provider oriented bridge like Wrapped, and be able to do, once you've got kind of liquidity on both sides, be able to do essentially atomic swaps, because Pact has the ability to, between our chain relay and Pact, we have the ability to thoroughly to be able to prove anything that happened in a decentralized way on the Ethereum platform. And because it's a swap, because you're talking about liquidity is already present on both sides of the equation, all you have to do is go make the necessary transfer, a vanilla transfer to a locker account on Ethereum, either way, and we can validate the swap entirely decentralized on Pact. And so we'll have this nice combination where you have kind of institutional level liquidity being brought over, you know, on platforms like Wrapped. And then when, in the case of something like somebody who holds BTC or someone who holds ETH, just talking about Ethereum, someone who holds ETH, and then, you know, and KETH, Keith, I'm going to call it KETH, on on the platform, that they'll be able to make truly decentralized and, you know, and as cheap as the gas will be, you know, cheap, almost free, and basically secured entirely by Pact, and not having to worry about the really vexing problems we've seen with people trying to move liquidity over in a more decentralized fashion of late, you know, where you have projects that, because of their bridges, like Thorchain. I mean, that's basically a bridge. The software that got attacked there is, and and they're trying to solve the problem in their own way. They're trying to with their pegging. So in a way, this is almost similar to pegging, but it's just really using LPs to move large volumes of liquidity, and then using the atomic swap concept as opposed to wrapping to be able to move liquidity between equivalent assets across chains. So that's something we're really excited about, and it's a really nice way that we show that you can use Pact as a cross-chain settlement language, even though it's on Kadena.
Yeah, I think, I'm not surprised about the story with the bridges so far, because it's just such powerful technology. If you asked me when I first started in the crypto space whether you can move assets across blockchains, I would have said, no way, it's not possible. And it's just like, I think one of the very humbling things about the space is you see people in the space making things you assumed were not possible and actually going ahead and doing them. And I think bridges are the most prominent example for me. And so I'm not surprised that it's been a bumpy road. It is just very complex technology to figure out. But yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think, hopefully tools like the one that Kadena is rolling out, it sounds like this solves, a lot of the issues that the space has been having. So that gives me a little bit more confidence about the future of bridges. But yeah, it's once this stuff gets figured out and the interfaces get figured out for this as well, I think that it just creates a really interesting ecosystem where it's just investors connecting to apps, and it's going to be on whatever blockchain. And so maybe Kadena is a hub for that, and through Kadena you can sort of access any applications on any blockchain on the other side. And we're just happy to be able to support and help bring that to market in any way we can. So I sort of see the long term of bridges as being decentralized. I think everything is going to be decentralized over the longer term, except for fiat on-ramps. Those have to be centralized, it looks like. But I think, in sort of the short to medium term, just to bootstrap this whole ecosystem and make it possible, I think solutions like ours are definitely the right thing for the market now. We hear a lot of things from institutions not being able to use the decentralized bridges because of either compliance requirements or other counterparty risk requirements. And so those are the sort of players that we're happy to bring in. And yeah, any way that we can support, your decentralized bridge, we're happy to do that, and to either partner on different initiatives and help bring assets through that as well. So really excited to see that come to market.
How did your journey start with Anchorage, right, and Wrapped?
So I would see Diogo. He's one of the co-founders of Anchorage. I would see him around a lot.
Nathan's the other
and sorry.
Diogo and Nathan the other guy's name? Maybe I have that wrong.
Yeah. So it's Diogo and Nathan are the co-founders, and so I would see him around a lot, and we were just friends. We would joke around a lot, and I don't know how we came upon Wrapped. We just had a really good relationship with Nathan, and then with Diogo. I met Nathan at some point at some events in San Francisco, and we started talking, became friends, and we were looking for a partner for this Wrapped solution, because obviously Wrapped.com is not a custody solution, it's a tokenization solution. And how do you make wrapped assets? It's sort of two parts, it's two pieces. It's custody, and at least in the centralized fashion, it's custody and tokenization. And so, just opened up some conversations, and there was a lot of interest in rolling something out here. And so they've been amazing to work with so far, and highly recommend them for anyone that's looking for custodying a large amount of assets securely. And I don't know, I think their solution's kind of interesting. We've seen single sig models in the custodian space. We've seen multi-sig models. They have something interesting in that, so it is sort of a I don't know the exact terminology. I'm pretty sure it's like an MPC type solution where the keys are at least sharded in different locations. But what's interesting is sort of the biometric layer that they built on top. And so there's sort of a level of checking your location, your device fingerprint, and your biometrics. And so what I liked also was like they're just one of the most advanced solutions as well. And so we're sort of proud to have them as a back end for custody there, because we think when institutions are looking at where to store their assets and to keep them, they're highly opinionated. And so we're happy to have a strong partner back there.
That's great to hear about. I met Diogo, and we met with Diogo and Nathan a lot in the early days of Kadena when they were just kind of getting started. And yeah, it seemed like that they were really going hardcore towards the the security model in order to basically to have a no apologies way to approach these institutions about crypto custody and to say we've actually thought of everything, and taking this seriously as a for holding investor quality amounts of assets, which is something that you normally need like a Fort Knox for or something. Yeah. So yeah, they definitely take that stuff seriously, and that is exciting that they've been able to. I mean, they really have done a lot. It's kind of a magic trick that they pulled, and I know they've worked really, really hard at it. One of the things about bridges, though, is that that I wanted to point out is that Kadena's design for scalable proof of work is based on some early designs in the Bitcoin community in 2014. And one of them was called Betacoin, proposed by Adam Back. And it just said that it wanted to have two coins and two chains. And the idea was that one of them would be kind of a beta chain, and it would solve this problem that Bitcoin had, which was, that that problem that you can't test things very well in testnet because you don't get the same kinds of network effects. There's a whole bunch of things that don't apply in testnet that apply in mainnet. And so the idea was that you have two chains, and most importantly, you have Bitcoin on both chains. And it was based on this idea of what we do on Kadena, which is that we use full SPV proofs because both chains are acting as a light client of one another. So it's a fully trustless multi-chain situation. The reason why I bring that up is that was the genesis of Lightning Network, and they talk about this early phase in the original Lightning paper, and I think what's interesting about it is that there was this notion early on that we're going to be able to do decentralized proofs that have the same, maybe not quite the same level of security as a layer 1 blockchain, but certainly comparable. And so the question is, why here it is, almost 10 years later, and we're still struggling to bring this decentralized, so for instance, even what we're doing with Kadena, I would say is decentralized economic security to compensate for the fact that it's not just a straight non-interactive trustless bridge. And I think that's, and my understanding of the space everywhere you look, that anybody who's not doing a centralized bridge is doing some kind of compromise like this. And I think the reason why we point a different direction is because we're built on the notion of non-interactive cross-chain liquidity. KDA, it's one of these things when you use Kadena that you won't even really notice, is that, oh, KDA, of course, well, there's Kadena, and then there's the KDA, which is the token. But to be able to have actually independent blockchains use the same currency is actually one of the most revolutionary concepts about Kadena, because it means that we had to go to market, we had to launch with trustless cross-chain bridges. So that's why that's why we talk about things like Kadena Mint, which is Pact running on Cosmos. We talk about our core Pact initiative with Polkadot and all the other places that Pact is going to end up, because the idea is a lot of this actually is powered by Pact. Pact has this ability to step a transaction through one or more steps in a safe way. It's one of the simplest things to do. It's what, like, just to nerd out a little, if anybody has a web developer background, you know, back in the day when you'd be doing like forms, you know, someone types something in and then they have to go to the next page. That is notoriously like brutal to code. You know, just doing something as a forward and back button is one of those things that can drive a developer crazy. You can have a ton of bugs. It's the same thing with a smart contract. To make a smart contract that can simply be in one state and then be in the next state is actually very difficult to do right. So Pact automatically does this for you. And that's what we use for cross chains. So the amount of code to send KDA from one chain to the next is very small and is very easy to understand because basically the platform handles it for you. So when we have Pact running, you know, not just on Kadena, but on ancillary blockchains, it's this idea that it's not enough to have a decentralized bridge that's secure. You actually need to be able to empower programmers to send new kinds of things over that bridge and feel safe about it. And so that's the future we're gunning for, you know, so that it's not just fungible tokens, it's NFTs, it's pretty much anything you can think of can be moved around, and a programmer doesn't have to, a DApp developer doesn't have to have a PhD in crypto and, you know, and all this like truly impressive, but, you know, kind of, you know, the amount of like let's put it this way, Solidity programmers right now are working very, very hard. And they really deserve better. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. But I still think that there's always going to be a role for institutional, and not to mention, it's where so much of the growth is right now in crypto is, you know, all of us who are here in crypto, I think sometimes we forget how early we are in this journey. You know, we are just starting to figure these things out the way that they're going to be. And meanwhile, everybody outside is fascinated and wants in. And they're intimidated right now because, you know, understandably. But, you know, less and less. Every day you have more entrants into crypto. But we're really at the very beginning. And that's so that's what excites me about like working with Wrapped is that, you know, it's never going to be a single chain world. It's never going to be a single asset world. It's never going to be only decentralized. I mean, fiat on-ramps, as you point out, was a great example of that. I mean, I guess if governments switch to digital, you know, you have these governments considering a digital currency. You know, maybe.
It's yeah. It's technically possible if you can like prove that someone has KYC'd without passing the information across. The thing is, there has to be a central authority still for that like information, which is centralized because. But I guess, yeah, I mean, if you go purely digital with identity, then I think you could totally make that work. Yeah.
Trying to fix my sound.
When you were saying PhD in crypto earlier, did you mean PhD in cryptography or PhD in cryptocurrency?
Yeah, right. Both. I mean, in this, there's no PhDs for crypto, right? For cryptocurrency.
I don't think you can get one yet. I don't know.
I just turned up my mic. I hope it's not like blasting me loud now. But, you know, programmers in some of these, in some of the leading projects, you know, have certainly that level of depth at this point, in the sense of what they've had to take on to get these things to market safely. You know, you have to, it's not just the programming language you're looking at. You really have to understand a lot of the warts. Like, if you're working on an EVM platform, you have to understand a really, truly terrifying amount of gotchas if you want to have a chance to make it to market. And that's something we really want to change. And we want to change it also because we want, you know, basically we want business to feel safe on crypto as well. But the cryptography part is interesting too. I mean, our work with, you know, we're doing a lot more work now with our advisor, Stuart Haber. And, you know, and there was just a big crypto conference in New York this last week, and cryptography conference. in New York, and cryptography used to be crypto. Like when you say crypto, that used to mean cryptography. So
you're not allowed to call crypto. You're not allowed to refer to crypto as cryptocurrencies in front of a cryptographer. They get really offended.
Wait, you can't call them cryptocurrencies even?
You can't say crypto as in short for cryptocurrencies.
Oh, as in short, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
so
that's cool.
Yeah. So and there it's really about some of these things, like what we're trying to do. Like we really see what we're doing with smart contracts is trying to take what a cryptographer wanted to do in them, namely Satoshi, in the sense that, you can argue that maybe one of the main innovations in the Bitcoin paper, because so much of it is built off of other technology, including Stuart Haber and Scott Stornetto's work, with their blockchain that they had been running since like 1992. One of the things that he introduced, I think the UTXO system had kind of existed before. Certainly proof of work existed before, but the Bitcoin script, which is something that implemented all this, really represented something that could be used for smart contracts, but it proved to be too unsafe.
I always wish people innovated a little bit more on scripts, because I guess Ethereum was sort of a response to that, was like sort of a response to the limitations of scripts. And I always wish people would innovate a little bit more on that. And I'm glad you guys sort of found a happy medium there. Because I think there's just so much more that you could do with it. And it keeps it super simple. It's so succinct that it's provides a very straightforward development environment. So yeah, our developers had a really good time developing with Pact, and they got a lot of comments that it was very straightforward, easy to get set up, easy to test, and all that stuff. So yeah, we really enjoyed working with your solution so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really fun effort, and I think people are going to be really impressed when KBTC and KETH rolls out, especially some of the things we're doing in security. For instance, formal verification. We made some. It's funny because it's a technology that was developed at Kadena, but we're actually still learning some of the ways that it really delivers value in practice. We had an interesting experience with Tokensoft, which is our DeFi infrastructure, which will be used by CADEX. We had a bounty program, bounty swap. The idea was run the DEX in production, but with these restricted coins. And if you could find an exploit, you keep the token that could be converted back to KDA. That was successful in finding a really nasty bug in the ledger that was custodying all the liquidity tokens, namely that the total supply, that you could mess with the total supply. So, so this was something humbling for us. It was a win, obviously, for the bounty program. That person was able to drain all of the. It was one of our community members who, was able to drain all of the funds from the smart contract. So they got the bounty. But we how could we have prevented this from happening in the first place? And so we looked at formal verification, and we realized that you can have this. You can basically, in a very small amount of code, be able to have formal verification check what access restrictions you're doing anytime you write to the database. And so that's a very powerful thing, because basically the way the blockchain moves forward in something like Pact is by a write to the database. So we're approaching the day when auditing. Right now, auditing is a black art in something like Sliven. You need to, especially if you're not just using a bunch of Zeppelin libraries. Like Open Zeppelin is one approach, the kind of curated code approach. If you're innovating, getting somebody to audit that code is, the auditor is a very difficult job, because there's no, it's basically a wide open field of possible bugs that can happen. But the way we are able to prevent the kind of bug that we saw in Kadena from ever happening again was to have this model that formal verification introduced that said, that covered every part in the code by default. In other words, you have to tell it why not to allow a particular access check to be enforced, as opposed to, oh, make sure it's checked here, make sure it's checked here. You have it fail whenever it's not enforced. And then it says, and then you say, well, here it's for this reason, here it's for this reason, here it's for this reason. And those have to correspond to other proofs in the same part of the formal verification. So what you're going to see, what users are going to see when some of the stuff that we've worked on with you guys is they're going to see that every single thing that you can do, whether it's administrative or whether it's the user, transfers, anything like that, will be represented in this kind of like total model where, like, if anybody was to introduce new code, it would break the model. So you know that everything's covered. So that's something, because it's important. Obviously, we want to use all of our best practices because there's going to be a lot of money in the BTC and ETH pairs, being that they're BTC and ETH. But it's been exciting because the administrative requirements for these tokens is very important too. So just making sure that that's all nailed down and bringing that to market is something we're really excited about.
Yeah, I think there was one interesting, I guess, event in the journey of formal verification that came out, I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago, with the sushi miso contracts. Did you see that? There was, so like formal verification, just for those that don't know, it's like being able to mathematically ensure like all the inputs and outputs are like tested and are basically acting as expected. And so, and it's sort of like came out of like computer chips. Like when you do chip design, you formally verify like computer chips because you want to make sure exactly what you expect to come out the other side actually happens. And how do you possibly write enough functional tests? You can't. And so you literally just do formal verification so you can prove every corner case. And the thing with Sushi is they actually had someone do formal verification on the smart contracts. They worked with Certora, which is actually a very well known and very high quality firm. But it looked like one of the rules was missed, was sort of the outcome of the situation. I think there was a very large amount. I don't remember the exact number. I don't remember if it was 300 million was in the contract. But there was the ability for someone to basically pull the funds out. And so Samsung found this and he did a write-up about it. And it just goes to show, like, I think it's still going to be a long journey. I think with formal verification on definitely on EVM-based solutions. And it's interesting to see that your solution sort of has that like auto checking mechanism and it has all the rules already sort of baked in where, if you don't want something, you have to remove it. Because this is sort of another phase shift, and it'll be interesting to see if sort of this is the right solution when it comes to formal verification on contracts, because there's been a lot of things that have been tried, right? So Certora has one solution and then Tezos had another take on it, and you guys have another one. But I really like the tool sets that you guys have around it, because you sort of get the live updates as you're coding, as I saw in the demo.
Right. That was in New York, right?
Yeah. And it was really interesting to see that. It's like someone watching over your shoulder every time you like type in a new line of code, which could might be annoying, but it's actually very helpful, because then you don't have to like come search for bugs later. It's like, well, if there's a bug there, like right away, so you can make the decision whether you want to design something differently, or did you actually miss something? Did you forget a best practice?
Right, and that was what was interesting working on these new tokens for Wrapped, was that because we came up with this new methodology in response to an exploit. So that's what I think is going to be so fun about the KBTC token and KETH token is that this time, you know, our teams were able to use this as we built it, and that meant that before we had even written a line of unit test code, we had already found bugs as we're developing, because you'd be like, you know, wait, that should have been covered. Why isn't that covered? Oh, you know, we didn't invoke that capability there. So the guard, you know, and the row guard didn't get enforced. And it's like ding, 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 ding. You know, it's like these things are showing up because it's actually finding them for you. Yeah, it's like a buddy. I think one thing that, and one of the ways
you guys need to bring back a Clippy that sort of is telling you.
Right, frowning or smirking. Yeah, I'm kind of smirking. Ridiculing you. One thing, you know, that for us, you know, is that you know, Bitcoin script. I think one thing that EVM I think kind of confused a little is that Bitcoin script, since it's a bytecode, makes people think of something like machine code, but it's not. It's actually just a small language. Compressed into a very small format that fits into. But you can, if you look at a standard Bitcoin transaction and someone breaks down the bytecode into names, you can read it like a script. It's a, you know, you can see it's a check sig and things like that. You know, it's actually doing like, it's actually doing the authorization on its way to releasing the funds from the UTXO. So that was the real inspiration for Pact. Is it was like, take a small language and make it Turing incomplete like Bitcoin script. Do things like not allow people to reassign variables, and that's what actually makes it so easy to formally verify. So it is a phase shift, because something like Solidity, if you just write unconstrained Solidity, it's very easy to write something that's impossible to verify, and that's frankly where most computer programming lives. You know, like most of the stuff people do, most developers don't get to use formal verification. Because it's simply not available. So that's something I think that I think Pact developers are going to start getting comfortable with, and then they're going to feel like superheroes, because, and they are, because they're going to be doing something that very few other developers get to do, which is work with these advanced tools. It's pretty incredible. Yeah,
they're superheroes and Kadena-farians.
Indeed.
The one thing, the one realization I had was, so I used to work with like computer chips a long time ago, and all of these like chips are basically boiled down, all the logic in chips is basically boiled down to logic gates, like AND, OR, XOR, XNOR. And if you look at the Bitcoin script, all of those are there. Everything that you need to build a computer chip is in Bitcoin script. And so then I sort of had this aha moment, like, wow, you can actually process anything in Bitcoin. Now you can do that theoretically. The problem is the cost to do that, the time to do that, the time to confirm and all that stuff. And I think for me, it's definitely exciting to see sort of like the next level of that. So you guys sort of like built a solution that has it like that flavor, like a sort of a more robust flavor of Bitcoin script, but now you have the scalability solved, and it's also like cross-chain. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what's sort of developed in the Kadena ecosystem that wasn't possible on Bitcoin, that wasn't possible on Ethereum. What is it about the foundational elements of Pact that sort of enables different types of thinking and different solutions that we haven't thought about before?
Well, and that's some of the work we're doing with Stuart Haber right now, is kind of doing some of the formal cryptography presentation of the whole of Pact, not just the language, but how it runs and how it works with the transaction payload and the signatures and the multisig that comes out of the transaction. Because our claim is that that's why we're more secure than Bitcoin script, is because we actually manage the entire interaction up until you get to the code, so that things like doing crypto for checking multisig is not something a developer deals with. It's in a way we're even more limited than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin actually kind of lets you do whatever you want. It's at this point, it's Bitcoin itself that's locking down the script. You could actually do as you say, you can do anything. But I think another thing about Bitcoin script is that, if you look at what Lightning did, they added the atomic hash log. So the idea was always that you could add new operations. And so you wouldn't have to have developers coding these from scratch. You could add like a powerful new operation and indeed they've done things like this with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has evolved, however slowly. But I thought maybe it's so much fun talking to you. I think we want to give some time over to seeing what questions we have from the community. There was one here that would be interesting to look at. And I think this is maybe kind of getting people familiar with the wrapped world. So I have some ideas about this, but I thought I'd give this to you first, Mason.
Yeah, so the way the wrap solution works is it's institutional only at the moment, and so it's only sort of funds that can that can use a bridge to go back and forth. And I think it's going to be your bridges that perhaps enable a little bit more. Is that correct?
Right. So the way to think of wrapped is for on-chain liquidity on Kadena initially. In the sense that people are in the Kadena ecosystem will start getting access to these high-quality assets via CADX and other DeFi, lending platform or other ways that people will start getting access to these tokens on Kadena. Now, when it comes to something like what we look forward to doing with Bitcoin as well, because Bitcoin has things, with the exact kind of atomic swap thing we were talking about with Ethereum, the same thing is possible with Bitcoin. So that once you have a liquidity provider holding KBTC who can, all you have to do is basically coordinate with that person, and then you can execute this swap. And also working with partners, more in this swap universe, because it's funny because swaps kind of fell out of, they kind of dropped out because I think swaps imply, it's this whole idea that you have to have liquidity in place first for a swap to really make sense. And, a lot of these platforms are trying to bootstrap liquidity off of Ethereum or off of Bitcoin. So that's where Wrapped comes in, because you're going to be able to do that in an industrial scale. And that's critical. I mean, it's like distribution, but it's more like this. It's really more like liquidity provision, in its kind of purest form. And then that solves that problem. So then we have a universe where, because of the flexibility of Pact, we'll be able to, and because of things like our chain relay, we'll have a chain relay for BTC. And at that point, a KBTC holder can swap with a BTC holder, and you can start getting native access to that liquidity both ways, but all guarded by the security of Pact and things like our chain relay. So that's going to be pretty exciting. What else we got? I'm just scrolling through these right now. I didn't see it, but I thought somebody mentioned, one thing that we're looking at working with you guys on is our Ethereum efforts, right?
Yeah. So a couple of the first assets that Wrapped.com launched was Wrapped Zcash, Wrapped Filecoin, basically bringing other layer ones onto Ethereum. And so one thing we're exploring with the Kadena team at the moment is whether a wrapped Kadena solution is possible. So basically bringing Kadena onto Ethereum so that we can connect it to the DeFi solutions that are out there on Ethereum today. So that's something we're definitely very interested in launching, and we're currently evaluating.
So this is a good question. It's not one we can say specific numbers, but the point is that we're not going to do it. We go hard or we go home, basically. And so this isn't something we're leaving a chance. There are lots of great partners that Kadena has, and Tokensoft has lots of great partners. And the real answer to this is that this is really where CADEX, something like CADEX, fits into the Kadena picture. Is that the way crypto works, one of the things that is, arguably what you might hate about crypto, but it's also one of the things that makes crypto great, is that the way you make things happen is you make it possible for people to make money doing it. And crypto basically, blows the doors off of all the ways you can do that, all the ways that you can engage a community or engage, select providers of liquidity and things like that. And that's where CADEX really comes in. And it's one of the reasons why we're working very hard, why I know the CADEX team is working very hard to to bring out their new light paper that's going to describe all of the initiatives that are going to make it a very, very profitable thing for liquidity providers to be present on the Kadena blockchain in size. So the thing about a DEX is a DEX doesn't really work if you don't have enough liquidity. Everybody knows that they're intensely inefficient if you don't go there with enough size. So we're not going to have a KBTC pair and a KETH pair in CADEX until the size is there, and when the size is there, you'll know.
I can provide a little bit of color here as to what we do operationally, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
And this question is from Liquidity Cloud, spelled with a Q. And so basically, like, how much liquidity will be provided on Kadena? I think the question is really, basically when KBTC and KETH come onto Kadena, there's going to be, creating the asset is one thing, right? And you can create the asset, but what are the use cases now? And so a big part of what we do is making sure that we line up all of the use cases so that there's sufficient interest to actually bring assets in. These liquidity providers that we work with, they're usually playing, anywhere from the millions to the tens of millions. And so they don't want to sort of bring in assets unless there's going to be opportunities to either arbitrage or to generate yield. And so a big part of what we do is just integrations with different DeFi solutions. And so we've been in really close contact with the Kadena, projects building on Kadena that are doing DeFi solutions to see, okay, what can we actually bring that's sort of interesting. And so that's something that we do. And then what do we usually see? So for like a AMM, the smallest that we've seen is like a 250K to 500K pool. And that's enough for people to start playing around with, I don't know, like with a few $1,000s to up to $10,000, in purchases at a time. But, as Stuart was saying, these things are inefficient. And so if people are going to start buying, 100K in KBTC to yield farm it somewhere, we're now going to get into the millions, right? And so the low end of what we usually see in terms of liquidity is in the millions, and then on the high end, it gets into the tens of millions. And so that's usually the range that we see people sort of pushing around to yield farm. If that's helpful context, it's just generically what we see out there when we're just watching the space and how our assets get moved and used.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at what we're doing on Kadena already, just with community-focused efforts, we've already got almost 20 million KDA locked up, and that's with zero marketing. And that's just, that's people actually just signing up to help us with, whether that's people investing in the new CADEX project, or people helping us secure the chain relay. So, that's when you do these things right in crypto, I've noticed, people show up, and, because they can kind of sense when something is differentiating and offering, kind of a place to do something. And the way you do things, with something like a DEX is that, you get the liquidity going. And that's how everybody makes money. Liquidity providers, that's how swappers get good, get efficient swaps. And that's how the liquidity providers really make their money. So it all kind of works together. I'm gonna throw this one at you, a little bit cheeky.
This is from Potato, and Potato's avatar is Bill Gates.
Right.
Is Tokensoft looking to settle all wrapped assets through Kadena? In terms of settlement, we're more of a technology solution. So if I think the bridge is definitely something we'd like to evaluate and see how we can provide people with better efficiency or better connectivity onto other chains. And so to the extent that those solutions are rolled out and there seems to be really good efficiency and stuff like that, we'd love to sort of see what else we could settle through Kadena. So it depends. We can't necessarily tell people what to do, but we can definitely create the solutions. And then if the efficiency is good or it gets you into more use cases, then people will just drive their liquidity through Kadena naturally.
Well, and I think the reason this is something that came out in our first press releases with this kind of teaser line, the first press releases with Tokensoft.
Yeah.
And yeah. I know, but all I want to say though is that kind of like just straight tech and what we've been doing. I think this thing about this kind of like harmonious interoperation between rock solid, secure, centralized providers, moving massive amounts of liquidity, and then decentralized solutions doing things like swaps. That's something. The fact that you can do all of the security on a flexible platform like Pact, I think, is one way that this could become a reality, simply because a lot of times settlement is just as simple as basically like, a row in a database somewhere. And so the question is, when you look at the whole universe of chains, what's the chain that it's going to be easiest to get to? What's the chain that is going to have the easiest time recognizing that something happened on another chain? Kadena has a shot at being that, because of the kind of multi-chain DNA in Pact. That Pact was always about being able to talk about things that are happening on other chains. That whole thing about being able to do a step transaction. The idea we had for something like swaps would be actually that it could actually function as a market where you could say, I'm willing to swap this. And that becomes a 3-step process, because now you've got the person who's actually posted the potential liquidity. So then someone else needs to basically come in and say, okay, I'm going to hit that, step 2. And then step 3 is they actually hit it on the target blockchain, and then it's done. Again, these are all the kinds of things that if you think of a human doing it, it's a fairly straightforward process. But getting code to do it in such a way that it never has any bugs is something that I think, Pact. If there was ever a language that allows you to ship something with potentially no bugs, it's Pact. And that's the kind of thing that's going to power these cross-chain settlement scenarios. All right, so that takes us to the hour. Mason, fantastic. It's really great talking to you and learning
Awesome,
more.
yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Hopefully next time we can do this with real fire instead of fans, and I'd look forward to that.
Awesome. Well, see you around, and we hope to bring you back soon to chat about more exciting things.
All right, thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye. Bye.
Thanks everybody for watching our Fireside, and we'll be doing another one real soon. So thanks for supporting Kadena, and talk to you soon.